I'm Heath Lambert, and you're listening to Marked by Grace, a podcast applying the grace of Jesus to all of life. Well, I want to welcome you to this edition of Marked by Grace, and I, in particular, want to welcome you to 2024. Happy New Year. I don't know if I'm the first person to greet you in the new year or if I'm further down on the list, but regardless of it, I hope 2023 was wonderful, and I hope you are looking forward to a wonderful 2024. I actually want to begin 2024 by talking about 2023. This is the time of year when folks are reflecting on the year in the past and they're looking forward to the year ahead. And we'll have a lot more to say about 2024 as the year progresses. But as I have been reflecting about 2023, one of the things that I have been doing is thinking about the books that I have read. At Marked by Grace, I love to answer your questions. I do that almost every week. If you have a question you would like me to answer, you can send that in to markedbygrace at fbcjax.com. That's fbcjax.com. It's fbcjax with an X, and I will get to as many of your questions as I can. I'm not this week answering a specific question that someone has sent in, but I'm answering a general question that I get asked a lot about the best book I've read or the best books I've read. I love to read. I do a lot of reading. I read for work. As I work for ministry, I read for fun, as it is one of my pastimes. It's impossible for me to answer what the best book is that I've ever read. One of the things I try to do, though, is think about the best book I read in the year. And what you're going to find this week on the podcast is that I can't even tell you what the best book I read in the year was. I've got it narrowed down to two. So I'm going to recommend my favorite books for 2023, and they are both nonfiction books. So they are both books that are not novels. Now, I read some great novels in the year. I read some great fiction books, but the two books that I'm going to recommend as my favorite books in 2023 are nonfiction books, and one is a history book and one is a ministry book. So not either one of those or neither one of those might be your thing. But my two favorite books in 2023 was one a history book and was one a ministry book. I'll tell you, as I tried to narrow it down to these two, I was really torn. There was a few close shaves, but I think I can recommend these two books, and I recommend them to you because maybe you'll like them. If you are in ministry or not, I think everybody could like this history book that I read. It is called Dead Wake, and it is by Erik Larson. Now, before I talk to you about Dead Wake by Erik Larson, let me talk to you about another author. So first of all, I love history books. As I mentioned, I love to read history books. I love to read biography. And probably my favorite history author is David McCullough. I love David McCullough's books. He is a true artist. He has an ability unlike anybody I have ever seen to talk about history, to talk about the details of history in a way that is full of color, in a way that doesn't feel burdensome, in a way that draws you in and just almost makes you forget about life outside of the book that you're reading. And I honestly haven't found anybody who can do it like he can do it. But I think Erik Larson is close. So I read my first two Erik Larson books in 2023. I loved both of them. Dead Wake has here made the list of one of my favorite books for 2023. Dead Wake is about the sinking of the Lusitania. Lusitania, you may or may not know, was a ship that was commissioned in 1906. It was sunk by the German Navy in 1915, and it killed over 1,100 people. It was just a true maritime catastrophe, and it was a huge part of the reality that led the United States into World War I. The United States definitely did not want to enter into World War I. And one of the main reasons they got into World War I was over the sinking of the Lusitania and the death of the American passengers on that ship. This book is a marvel. I don't care if you care about naval history or naval warfare. You might not care about that or not. What you are going to find is that as you read Larson's book, you are going to find that you are drawn into the countless human stories that he just traces all through the whole thing. And one of the things that he does in the book that is just so amazing is he draws out all of the things that happened that led to the sinking, that if the ship had left on time, it wouldn't have been where it was when the U-boat sunk it. If they hadn't gotten delayed on the crossing a little bit, they wouldn't have been where they were when the U-boat sunk. He just draws out all these little things that happen to get it right where it was at the exact moment that the U-boat was where it was, and tragedy struck. It's absolutely fascinating to read. I'm going to actually read to you one passage that just sort of gets at it. This is long about the middle of the book, and he's talking about British intelligence. And he says it was a curious moment in the history of naval warfare. British intelligence knew a U-boat was heading south to Liverpool, knew the boat's history, knew that it was now somewhere in the North Atlantic under orders to sink troop transports and any other British vessel it encountered, and knew as well that the submarine was armed with enough shells and torpedoes to sink 12 ships. It was like knowing that a particular killer was loose on the streets of London, armed with a particular weapon and certain to strike in a particular neighborhood within the next few days, the only unknown being exactly when. You just hear that, and it's these kind of scintillating details and scintillating language that just draws you in at every page. If you're looking for a good book about history, if you're just looking for a good book with a fascinating story, I'd encourage you to pick up Dead Wake by Erik Larson. And then the other book, another book that was just one of my favorites in 2023, I could give you 10, I could give you 5, I'm giving you 2, I think just as much because that's what I did last year. The second book is a ministry book. This is a good book. I think everybody in ministry ought to read this book. It's actually an older book. It's been around for a while. It was first copyrighted in 1987, so it's been around a little while. I had just never read it, and I picked it up in 2023. I gave it actually as a gift to all of our pastors at First Baptist Church because I just thought it was so helpful, and it is called Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome. Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome by Kent and Barbara Hughes. It is a fascinating book because what it's about is it's about how do we evaluate successfulness? How do we evaluate whether or not we've been successful in ministry? And one of the things that makes the book so great is Kent and Barbara Hughes have been a ministry couple for a long time. And they tell the story in the book of just this time when Kent, who was serving as a pastor and things were not going well, he just talked about how he was exhausted and spent, and he just felt like a failure. And what that sense of failure did was it pushed them into the Bible to figure out, how do we define what ministry success really is? Is it just big numbers? Is it just growing numbers? Or is it something else? This fascinating passage early in the book, they say, when success in the ministry becomes the same as success in the world, the servant of God evaluates his success like a businessman or an athlete or a politician. He says a few paragraphs later, I realized that I had been subtly seduced by the secular thinking that places a number on everything. Instead of evaluating myself and the ministry from God's point of view, I was using the world's standard of Quantitative Analysis. It's a fascinating book as he takes you on a journey to discover what the Bible says about how we measure success. The Bible has a standard for how we measure success, but it's not the same way the world does it. It's one thing to hear the biblical teaching about this. It's another thing to hear the biblical teaching from a man whose education in it was hard won. He has been down the personal road of feeling like a failure and encountering the biblical teaching about how we really evaluate ourselves. Listen, I think that this is a good book for you if you are leading a big ministry or a small ministry. I think it's a good book for you if you are leading a growing ministry or a declining ministry. I think it is very, very helpful to figure out what God thinks about how we evaluate our ministry. Actually, I think it'd be a good book for you even if you're not in ministry. Some of you are a part of ministries. And there's church people out there who are making judgments about their pastor or their leadership or their ministry because, well, that church down the road is great big and they're growing and we're not. Well, listen, we want to praise when there is fruitfulness in ministry. But fruitfulness in ministry is not the only indicator of success, and it's not even the main indicator of success. In fact, there's all sorts of ways to have a big growing ministry that is not a faithful ministry. And so it's probably a good book for everybody to read. And I really want to commend it to you. One of the things that I'm looking forward to about 2024 is all of the books there are yet to read. I got a lot of books. I got a couple of big stacks that I'm working my way through. I am encouraged about what I'm going to learn. I'm encouraged about how I'm going to grow. And at the end of this year, I'll share some of it with you. I hope you have a great week and a happy new year.